I hope you're very well today. Yeah, okay. We're working in this study group where we'll discuss these following topics, like are the Old English period, the Anglo-Saxon, the language in the Old period. This is our team, right? Laura Elena Córdoba Castañero, Carlos Castillo Trujillo, John Arana Bisaid López Martínez, and me, Andrea Belén Mosqueda. Okay, and I'm going to start to talk about this with this first question. That is, what did you know about the Old English? And yeah, I'm going to give you like a brief introduction about this topic, like what is Old English. And yep, Old English or Anglo-Saxon language is like an early form of the English language, spoken between the 450 and the 1100. This cannot be confused with the English language, like it's completely different. And well, the Old English or Anglo-Saxon is like an early form of the English language that was spoken in much of what is now England or southern Scotland. And it was an inflectional language with a lot of freedom in syntax, unlike the current English that we know nowadays. And the writings that have survived to this day represent about all the literature registered in the Anglo-Saxon history. Now, please, Laura, what did you know about the Old English?
Previous to the readings and the videos that we watch as part of this lesson, I pretty much knew almost nothing about this topic. I didn't know exactly what the culture, the people, and the language was like in the Old English period. I was very unaware of a lot of things, and even though I know how to speak English, I never really cared to do research to know how it began, what it was in the past, and how it evolved to become what we know today as English. So thanks to the readings and to everything that we have studied during these last classes, I think I can understand a little bit better, and that has brought me a lot of useful knowledge that I think will help me understand English better.
Thank you very much, Laura. The next one, please, Jonathan. What did you know about the Old English?
Well, before this class, I didn't know anything about the Old English, but now, thanks to the class, I know that the English, it's like a kind of different language, because I thought it was the same all the time, and that's a little funny because even all the language in the world has different changes about the history.
Yeah, I'm agree. Carlos Trujillo, can you tell me what did you know about the Old English?
Well, I think almost same as Laura because, well, first of all, starting like when you're learning any type of topic, you don't if you have never read about it, you're never gonna know nothing about it exactly. So, to be honest, I didn't know nothing, exactly nothing. I didn't know how did it become English or who created it or from where did it come from. Like Laura said, I can speak English, but I never put that importance to learn more about this, about the language and the story behind the language.
Yeah, I also think the same. There are topics that were not usually treated in basic level, like in basic level classes or in basic, yeah, like in basic level of study, because they tend to focus in the story of other country, like the England or the US. Yeah, in their kind of classes, we only search about our our country, like in Mexico, without joining others in the discussion. So I'm agree with that point of view. Okay, now we're going to answer these questions that I formulate. for this study group. And the first question is, what do you think was the role of migration and cultural exchange in the Old English period? And the first person that's going to answer is Jonathan, please.
Okay, I think this role was the most important because based on it, the Old English was building. So the Anglo-Saxon, the religious, this was modification. These things was modifying the language to form what we are now English in these days.
Thank you very much. Now, Carlos, please.
Okay, so what I think about this question is that maybe at the beginning, the role of the migration, of the cultural exchange of the old language of English, well, I consider that maybe in the beginning, it wasn't a role or it didn't have like an importance. But maybe after everything and through the years of the day, it started to become like important because it was necessary to communicate to other people. Maybe if it wasn't a war or if they were like slaves in those years and they were trying to communicate with those peoples but they didn't speak the language, then it become important, or maybe that is when it started, like the main role, the main importance of this was to exchange culture and to be able to communicate with other people.
I think the same. Laura, please.
Okay. Well, I actually disagree with Carlos. I think migration has always had it always had an important role when it comes to the language in general, not just when it comes to Old English, but since the language was born, I think migration has had a very relevant role in all the changes that have happened with languages all around the world. But when we focus in the Old English, in the Old English period, I think that migration and cultural exchange had a huge role in the way the language, the culture, and the people were back then. It made it be the way it was back then, and it also brought tons of, well, in the case of language, it brought a lot of borrowings, words, and new vocabulary that were incorporated into Old English, and it also changed a lot of things like phonetics and pronunciation. So I think the role migration and cultural exchange in the Old English period was huge, enormous, pretty much.
I don't know if I can say something. Like,
Yeah, you can.
I do agree with Laura what she's saying, but like for me, at the beginning of the migration of a language, maybe it didn't have like an importance or a point. Like they were not like, we're gonna go to another place and we're gonna teach the language just because we want them to learn that language, and that's it. In my point of view, like I totally agree with you that it is important and that it was like the biggest change maybe in the languages. But for me, maybe at the beginning of the migration of a language, it didn't have like a role or an importance or a goal, let's say it like that. For me, I don't know, but I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I share this point of view of Carlos. Like, you have to use the word role as something like stronger. I think that a role is something assigned with previous knowledge, and unfortunately, much of the cultural exchange or language exchange that we know in nowadays was not part of some beautiful story. It was something forced, as Carlos mentioned. I think many don't see migration as teaching or share ideas. They see like a form to survive. I'm going to talk about the second question, please. That is, based on the videos on the platform and the poem Beowulf, do you consider that all English has changed to current English? Laura, please answer.
Yes, I think it has changed a lot. It definitely hasn't stayed the same. What we know as English today is very, very different from what Old English used to be. It there were many differences, like the way it was written and the way it was spoken. There were letters back then in the Old English that we don't use today anymore. We don't write the way they used to write back then. There are many words that change that change into the words that we use today. The phonetics were different, and even the order the words had in sentences back then was different to the way we speak today. So there are a lot of similarities because the English we speak today comes from Old English, but it's not the same. So it has changed.
Jonathan, please.
Okay. Yeah, I agree with Laura. The difference are a lot. In the platform, there is a video where it says the famous phrase, "To be or not to be." That's the question. In Old English is "tu veona" or "ne tu veona." That is frying. So the word frying is similar to the writing or the spelling to fragen in Dutch. So I see a lot of similarities to Dutch and Old English that we don't see a lot on the current English.
Okay, now Carlos, please.
Okay, I totally agree with Jonathan and Lara more when she said that the English maybe it's the same, maybe has some same words at as the beginning, but it's like really different. And I was saying, like an example I was thinking about was like a car, the first car that was created. Maybe the purpose it was to transport people from one place to another, but it was like too old, like maybe it wasn't the perfect car. Nowadays, the newest car, it's also able to transport people from one place to another, but it's going to have I don't know, better wheels. It's going to use less gas and all that. So let's put it as same as the language. The English that was the old English is really different from how it is right now. That's what I think, and I also agree with Laura.
That was a lovely and easy to understand example, Carlos. And yeah, it has changed a lot. Although there are a few words that we use a lot in the present of the Old English period, most of them have completely changed in this nowadays. And the other question is, what event do you think influenced most the Old English period? Let's start with Jonathan.
Okay, I think the most important event was the Anglo-Saxon arriving, the three colonies. I think that why the English is a Germanic language. So this is something important in the Old English story.
Thank you very much. Laura?
Yes, I actually agree with Jonathan. I think the most important event in the Old English period was probably the arrival of the Germanic tribes, the Jutes, the Angles, and the Saxons, because that event pretty much is what made Old English appear. Obviously, later on, there were other major events that also influenced a lot, like the Norman Conquest, for example, or when St. Augustine arrived in Britain for Christian conversion, for example.
Now, Carlos, please.
Laura and Jonathan, I think that the most important event that influenced most on the Old English was Anglo-Saxon, because it's where the whole language was mostly created. Oh, well, that's what I think. I really can't say that much because Laura already said everything what I was going to say.
Don't worry. And yeah, I think like this time and the Dark Age was a pretty ugly time because most of the cultural and language exchange was about Christian conversion or religion conversion. Okay, let's talk about the next question. And is, how do you think the Old English influence nowadays? Let's start with Carlos, please.
I just think that Old English influence not that much as we said almost at the beginning of the questions, that it is similar to the old language in some kind of words, but it's really different. So maybe it influenced just a little bit for me, or what I think, because we just use some words, but through the past of the years, it has been changing. That's what I think.
Okay, now Laura.
Well, I actually think, unlike Carlos, I think the influence was very big. If all the events that happened during this period hadn't happened the way they happened, English wouldn't be the way that we know it and speak it today. So, history, everything that happened in the Old English period is what makes English today be the English that it is today. And all the words that we use in English today, or most of them, they either come from the Old English, or they became part of the language as part of a major event that happened during this period. So I think we can see the influence all the time. Whenever we speak the language, it is there.
Now Jonathan, please.
Okay. Directly, I'm not pretty sure what is the influence, but if the old English is the base of the English we know nowadays, I know this is clear, as Laura said. So it is important. The influence is very, very clear.
Okay, everything that we know now exists because someone created, right? And I believe that every event has a consequence, and we need to have a more historical memory to notice the goods and bads that exist in our story, and know where they're created, why they're created, and how we use this cultural, political, and historical knowledge these days. Okay, now we have the conclusion, and it's why do you think it's relevant to know the history of all English for you as future English teacher? Okay, let's start with Laura, please.
Yes. So as I mentioned at the beginning, learning about the Old English has helped me personally to understand English, the language, a lot better. I think as English teachers, as future English teachers, we must not only know how to speak the language, but we must know the language itself very deeply and completely. In order to be good teachers, right? We cannot just know English like an average speaker would. We need to know how it works, why it works the way it works, how it began, the history of it. So I think it's that's why it's relevant to know the history of all English.
Okay, Carlos, please.
In this question, it says, what do we think, or as future teachers? And I think that as teachers, we have to be prepared for every type of questions. Like Laura said, we need to know the language, but we never know what type of students we're going to have. There's always going to be this one student that will want to know more about it and what's behind it, what's behind the language. In this case, the history, from where did it come from, why, how, and all those questions. So I think it is relevant to know all this information.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Okay. As an English teacher, I don't think it's really, really very, very important, but it's necessary to know this background, this historical background, because maybe for the curiosity, or maybe we want to know where come from a word that we don't know.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. I think the same as you all. As teachers, we need to answer these questions with a lot of ethical memory and historical memory. So I think it's very important. Thank you very much.